So I'm delighted to be back here with David Flatman from Bath Rugby for the second in our Pride in the Lions series. David, hopefully you had a chance to watch the Barbarians Lions match on Saturday. I thought it was a highly entertaining clash, but what does that really tell us about the Lions squad?
Well, I think it's, for me it was a bit of a worry because the climate was nothing to do with the Australian climate. It was extreme and not representative of what they're going to be facing in terms of humidity. It was an injury risk, it was a cash cow and all that, but actually I thought it ended up being useful exercise. On a tour like this, part of the bonding, everyone thinks the bonding is to do with, socialising and drinking beers. That's not the only way you bond. That is a way you bond, and they will be doing that, I'm sure. But it's about playing with different guys, and we saw at the weekend that certain combinations really dominated that match. So Roberts and Davis in the midfield, Hibbard and Jones in the front row, really laying most sort of solid, brutal platforms. Actually, it's about getting different combinations playing together, and apart from anything else, it's just an extra match. It's an extra 80 minutes they've got under their belt to test people out. It's playing new systems, playing in the new jerseys. Everything makes a difference. Communicating with different guys. So I did think it was useful. What did it tell us? I think it told us that there is great potential on this trip for this squad to introduce, almost to bolt on an element of finesse on top of that power that we knew was coming with the Gatland game, with the selections he made. There were some lovely touches, especially in the midfield, and some really promising stuff in the back three. I think actually there's a chance that the Lions are going to do more than just batter everybody. They're going to do it in style. They're going to batter them in style, and I think it looked good at the weekend. I enjoyed it.
Mike Phillips certainly put down a marker, but do you think Owen Farrell's chances will have been dented at all because of his handling errors?
Yeah, they will. I mean, it's very difficult. I mean, very, very difficult. And when he was holding Scott Britz's shirt, and of course Britz punched him and all that. I actually thought he was quite reserved, considering how fiery he is and the fact that he'd just been chinned. I expect if that had been a league game at the end of the season and he wasn't playing for anything, then Scott Britz might have done a bit worse out of that and might have worn one, I think. But he restrained himself relatively well from what was quite an annoying situation. He started it, of course, by holding the jersey, but I think the handling errors they're irrelevant almost. There were a few of them, but they're down to that ball. They'll never play with a ball like that again, hopefully, for the rest of their careers. Lots and lots of players experienced that at the weekend. He just handles the ball more often than everyone else in the whole team except Mike Phillips. And it also happened to him. So, I mean, he just happens to handle the ball a lot more than everyone else. And a lot of players get the ball, grab it and run with it. He's getting the ball at pace, instantly has to pass it. It's difficult. So his job in terms of that ball handling, the scrum half might hold the ball ultimately more, but he's picking it off the floor. He's not catching and giving, so it does make it more difficult for Farrell than for anybody else in terms of handling it. But I think in terms of selection chances, he wasn't very good. He kicked his goals pretty well, but otherwise it didn't go brilliantly for him. So I don't think he was ever going to start the tests. I don't think that, as things stand, I think he'll still be in the matchday squad, so that hasn't changed. But the better you play, the more likely they are to start you or put you on if you're on the bench. So he needs to up it.
A very different lineup for Wednesday's game against Western Force. I suppose it's a bit early to be reading into the combinations that Warren Gatland has put together, but can we work out anything from this new side? I
think a really interesting one for me is the second row. Is a second row position, and with Evans and Wyn Jones, I think Paul O'Connell he's just monstrous, and he plays. He starts the test. If he can walk, then he plays. Alan Wyn Jones, I think, came off the bench and actually made Richie Gray's performance look almost worse than it was, because he was so active and so destructive, especially in defence when he was on the field. It's a really, really interesting position for me, that, because I almost wondered if, with that's such a wealth of talent in the back row, whether they might consider a Tom Croft in the second row, because it's, inverted commas, only Australia. I think in scrummaging terms that could be tough, because I think they're better than everyone thinks, the Australians, but certainly the first choice guys are, but I don't think they're going to do that now. I think the second rows are too strong. So I'm interested to see, having seen Richie Gray, I thought he was okay in the first game. I didn't think he lit the world up. It is a difficult environment, but it's almost a 50-60 point game is his environment, because it's a lot of ball carrying, a lot of open space, a lot of counter attack, and we didn't really see him in the game as much as we thought. I think Ian Evans will be looking at that thinking, Alan Wynne-Jones might well be the starter, but Ian Evans will be looking at this as a very, very big game to try and secure a spot in that match, in that Test 23, which ultimately is what it's all about.
So O'Connell captained, Paul O'Connell captained the Lions against the Barbars on Saturday, and O'Driscoll's going to captain the Lions against Western Force on Wednesday. And Warren Gatland appears to like going with experience. Yeah,
except Sam Warburton, who's 24, isn't he, or something. I think that what you've got to remember is that if you're playing in the same team as Brian O'Driscoll and he's not captain, then someone's got to captain Brian O'Driscoll and someone has got to captain Paul O'Connell. And these guys aren't prima donnas, they're down to earth, they're great blokes apart from anything else. So that isn't, you're not talking about egos and personalities, you're talking about people feeling comfortable directing them and giving them telling them what is happening. This is what we are doing. So you can take advice all you like, but ultimately if you're the captain, responsibility for final decisions falls on your shoulders. So you have to have someone who is capable of overruling two of the best players in the game. Brian O'Driscoll might be best player ever or one of them. So it's not a surprise to me that if Warburton's not playing one of those two as captain, because they can speak and everyone will listen. And obviously Sam Warburton, don't know him personally, but Gatland knows the game and knows these guys well. He's obviously special enough that when he speaks, the likes of O'Connell and O'Driscoll, you really take heed, and that's it says a huge amount for him as a bloke, I think.
Oh, there was a slightly mischievous reason for me asking that last question, because last time we were speaking about this, we were talking about Johnny Wilkinson, and you alluded to the fact that a lot in the media, including David Campese, I think, this week, have suggested that picking Wilkinson...
As soon as he said it, it's not happening.
Yeah. Said that picking Wilkinson would be a backward step and, harking back to the past, he's not the player that he used to be. But it just struck me that with going with the experience of O'Connell and the experience of O'Driscoll, it seems that actually picking players who captained not only the last Lions tour, but the one before that, going back to former players, particularly if they're in good form, surely can't be that much of a backward step.
Well, look at the players all around him, and I don't know how you can call Johnny Wilkinson a backward step from anything, really. I mean, Owen Farrell's a very, very good player, and psychologically he's an incredible young man, actually. But in terms of mental toughness and resilience and all that, but then, did you see anything at the weekend from Owen Farrell that he's the choice of the future, he's the right choice for now, according to someone like Campese? But did you see anything that Wilkinson couldn't produce? I didn't. And I rarely have. It's not that I don't think Owen Farrell's good, I think he's very good. I just think Johnny Wilkinson's just as good. And, I just think what damage can bringing Johnny Wilkinson on tour do? I mean, it can't do any. I don't see any way in which it can negatively affect that tour, other than it's already started and he'd be late. So that might not work.
David Campese seems convinced that actually he is going to pop up sooner rather than later.
That's the word. But, Toulon played in the French final a number of days ago now, so they'd have had the call by now, we'd all know by now, so I don't know, maybe it's not happening, but I wouldn't worry too much about what David Campese says about anything, to be honest.
The other thing that strikes me on a serious note is that they've only got two fly halves. And in the first game against the Barbarians, Farrell was replaced by Sexton, understandably so, because you wouldn't want to, you want to try and both that. Sexton starts on Wednesday. We can only assume, I would imagine, that he's going to be replaced after an hour or 70 minutes by Farrell. I mean, could you actually go through the entire Lions Test series with two fly halves who end up replacing each other in every single match?
Well, yeah, you could, but it's not ideal.
No.
It's just high risk. They've got Stuart Hogg, the Scottish fullback, who's evidently, or apparently a very good fly half. But it seems odd to have somebody as next direct replacement who will be playing out of their natural position and a long way out of it at this level, at British Lions level. That seems odd. So I don't know what they're intending to do. That's why it seems just more likely that Johnny's going to be flown out. But then these things rarely escape. These things rarely don't leak. So they rarely escape the attention of the media. So I think we'd probably know about it by now. I'm not sure.
So Queensland Reds then on Saturday, looking ahead after the Wednesday game. Do you think this will be the Lions' biggest test so far?
Oh yeah, it will. The Western Force will be tough, but if you look at the Queensland Reds lineup and the guys they've got running the game for them, you know, guys like Quade Cooper, you know, that's big. And you're talking about one of the most talented guys on the planet, who's probably never been more motivated to play well. But you've got to remember, all of these games, they're the biggest game of the year. Unless these guys are making grand finals in the Super 15, this is their biggest game of the year. This is a massive stage, and it's very few players get to play for the Lions. Equally few get to play against them. So it's a big day, and I think it will prove a hell of a test. But actually, I think a lot of these games will. It all depends on ultimately what players the Australian Rugby Union allow to play, if that's how it works. But how many test players are there in these sides? Because you'll have the youth and the hunger and that desire to be the guys that scout the Lions on tour and all that sort of stuff. But what you really want actually are the test players who haven't been picked. You want as many of those as possible. Fringe test players or guys that have been left out, like Cooper. You know, from an Australian point of view, you want those guys playing because they're the guys with the biggest chip on their shoulder. So as it gets closer to test time, every examination becomes more intense. There's more at stake for the Lions, and we'll learn a huge amount more about them each time they play. It's very, very interesting to watch.
In a way, Saturday's game could tell us a little bit more about the Australian lineup than the Lions lineup for the first test, because if Quade Cooper does play, then we can only assume that he's not going to get the call up for the final squad.
It looks like he's not, but if he's good enough, they'll pick him, because ultimately they want to win. And you can talk about, you know, culture and talk about what people should and shouldn't say to the media and all that, but I think there does come a point when there's this much at stake and this many people watching, that if they feel they've got a 50-50 call between Quade Cooper and somebody else, or Berwick Barnes or whomever, there's a good chance they won't choose Quade Cooper. But if he's so good that there really isn't a choice, then I think they have to pick him and, you know, let him do his thing, because 10 years from now no one will care about the politics of the day. You know, they'll care about whether the Australians beat the Lions, and Quade Cooper is the sort of guy that can affect a series on talent alone.
David, thank you as always. Thank you very much for your time. Interesting stuff. We look forward to seeing how the next 7 days of rugby pans out.
Cheers, thank you.
Cheers.